Welcome to Chapter 3, Managers as Decision Makers. The more we know about decision-making and the decision-making process, the better the decision is likely to be. As managers, we're making decisions all day long. Those could be big decisions, small decisions. They could be decisions where we have a lot of information, limited information, or perhaps no information at all. Problems. Problem solving is identifying and taking action to solve problems. A big part of management. Knowledge workers use information to solve problems, and this would also be an accurate description of a manager. As managers, we are knowledge workers. A performance threat is a situation where something could go wrong or is likely to go wrong. A performance opportunity is a situation that offers the possibility of a better future if the right steps are taken. Managers need the following competencies. Information competency. This is the ability to locate, retrieve, evaluate, organize, and analyze information to make decisions that solve problems. Technological competency is the ability to understand new technologies and use them to their best advantage. And analytical competency is the ability to evaluate and analyze information. Problems can pose threats and opportunities. Planning, organizing, leading, and controlling are the 4 functions of management that this course is focused on. Now we see those 3 competencies, which all relate to these functions: decisional roles, interpersonal roles, and information roles. So in decisional roles, you need to use information. It could be related to entrepreneurship, resource allocation, disturbance handling, or negotiation. With interpersonal roles, information can be used for ceremonies, motivation, networking, and in informational roles, that information is sought, received, and transferred among insiders and outsiders in the organization. Problem-solving approaches. Problem avoiders are people who prefer not to make decisions and ignore problems. Problem solvers react to problems as they occur, and problem seekers are proactive in anticipating threats and opportunities. So in this case, a problem seeker could be a very positive way to be proactive, to anticipate those threats or opportunities so that you can more adequately prepare for them. A decision is simply a choice among possible alternative courses of action. There are 2 main categories when it comes to the decisions that we make. Programmed decisions is when we apply a solution from past experiences to a routine problem. So maybe you're on the way to work and you encounter bad traffic, and you have another route that you use to get to work that you use all the time. And so you apply that same solution to get to work on time and get around that traffic. A non-programmed decision applies when there's a specific solution crafted for a unique problem. So if it's a problem that you've never encountered before, and now you have to come up with a solution. Systematic thinking. This is when we approach problems in a rational and analytical fashion. You could think of a term like logical. Intuitive thinking is when we approach problems in a flexible and spontaneous fashion. Certainly doesn't mean one is right or wrong. Typically, this tends to be more genetic based for us. If you think about how you make decisions, you may be someone who's highly logical. You may need data, information, and facts to analyze before you make a decision, or maybe you're the type of person that relies on your intuition, that says, oh, I have this gut feeling that this is a good idea. Managers use different cognitive styles. So when we look at how we evaluate information and how we process information, is it more feeling or thinking based? And is it more sensing or intuition based? Managers make decisions with various amounts of information. In a certain environment, we have complete information on all alternatives and consequences. In a risk environment, we don't have all of the information, but we have some probabilities and likely outcomes for these alternative courses of action. In an uncertain environment, we lack so much information that it's difficult to assign probabilities and very difficult to understand the likely outcomes. The higher up you go in management, the more you're living in this uncertain environment. This is why CEOs of corporations get paid the big bucks, because they're really getting paid to make decisions with very limited information. At any given time, you may only have 10% of the information that you really need to make a big decision. From a visual standpoint, you can see these problem-solving environments. You have problems, alternatives, and outcomes in a certain environment. Whereas in a risk environment, problems, alternatives, and outcomes with some probabilities, again, more limited information. Whereas in an uncertain environment, we have some question marks. We just simply don't know. When it comes to problem solving, we need to identify and define the problem, generate and evaluate alternative courses of action, decide on a preferred course of action, implement the decision, and evaluate the results. Ethical reasoning is important in all of these, and we looked at ethics in our last chapter. So from a visual standpoint, here's how we go through those steps, and you can see that the ethical analysis is part of each and every step in the decision-making process. When it comes to gathering information, some of the common mistakes include defining the problem too broadly or too narrowly, focusing on symptoms instead of causes. A common example of this would be to say the problem is that sales are down. So maybe you are the manager of a sales department. You could say, well, the sales are down, that's the problem. That's not actually the problem. That's a symptom. There's some underlying reason why those sales are down. And choosing the wrong problem to deal with, another common mistake. Who are the stakeholders and how will the alternatives affect them? Again, stakeholders being anyone who has a stake in that company. Criteria for evaluating alternatives could be a cost-benefit analysis. It could relate to timeliness. Is this something that needs to be taken care of right away, or is this more of a long-term problem? Acceptability and ethical soundness. When looking at different outcomes, the behavioral model leads to first finding the solution that appears to be satisfactory. So what's the first one that is going to suffice that issue? The classical model leads to optimizing those decisions, so the absolute best solution to that problem. Classical versus behavioral. The classical model, you tend to see that structured, clearly defined problem. And in that behavioral model, you see a more unstructured problem. It's not clearly defined, it's more uncertain. Taking action is the next step. Lack of participation error occurs when parties necessary for supporting the decision were not included in the process. This is why including people in the process of actually making decisions can really work in your favor. It's important that you always evaluate the results at the end of the decision-making process. Ask yourself, did the decision solve the problem? Results must be evaluated against objectives set at the beginning of the process. Ethical reasoning is very important when it comes to decision making. We looked at ethical reasoning in our ethics chapter. We need to look at the utility and ask ourselves, does the decision satisfy all constituents or stakeholders? The rights, does the decision respect everyone's rights and duties? Justice, is the decision consistent with justice? And caring, is the decision consistent with my responsibilities to care? Some spotlight questions. Ask yourself, how would I feel if my family found out about this decision? How would you feel if this decision were published somewhere? And what would the person that you know who has the strongest character and best ethical judgment, what would they say about your decision? Creativity plays a big role in our decision making. Creativity is simply generating a novel idea or unique approach. Big C, creativity, occurs when extraordinary things are done by exceptional people. Little c, creativity, occurs when average people come up with unique ways to deal with daily events and situations. Personal creativity drivers include task expertise and task motivation. These go hand in hand. Creativity skills include imagination, intuition, holistic processing, which is basically looking at the big picture, and right brain characteristics. Personal factors that drive creativity. Again, we just saw what these mean: task expertise, task motivation, and creativity skills. We're not always making decisions as individuals when we're managers. A lot of the time, we'll be involved in group decision making. Group decisions can be good because you can have more information, more expertise, more viewpoints, more ways to look at the problem. More alternatives can also be generated just because of the process and discussion. Increased understanding and greater acceptance, and also increased commitment. Some of the challenges with group decisions could be conformity and social pressures, domination by a few members, and time delays. The more people that are involved tends to have more time delays to reach that solution. Other decision-making errors: heuristics simplifies decision making when time or information is scarce. You could think of the phrases the rule of thumb or trial and error. That would be a way to think about these types of situations. Availability. So do you have that information? Representative. So this would be more the likelihood based on something similar in the past. Anchoring and adjustment focuses on making adjustments to a previous starting point. Framing error. This is when you're solving the problem in the context of some type of perceived example. So are you framing that problem as positive or negative? Confirmation error. This is when you only pay attention to information that confirms the decision that has been made. Escalating commitment focuses on adding resources to a course of action even if it's not working. Other decision-making errors. So the escalation trap. With this, you need to set those limits. How involved and how committed will you be, even if that decision's not working? Making your own decisions and carefully determining why are you continuing this course of action. Are there sufficient reasons or are there not? And also remind yourself the costs of a course of action. Decision making in a crisis. A crisis is any type of unexpected situation that can lead to a disaster if not handled quickly. Crisis management programs train managers in decision making and establish plans to handle emergencies. Decision making in a crisis. First, you need to figure out what is going on. This may not always be easy. You may not be sure what exactly is happening. What is the crisis? Remember that in a crisis, speed matters. So in these situations, you just simply don't have time to analyze and have group decision making. Remember that also slow decision making counts. Depending on that crisis, maybe there is a certain part of that problem that you don't just want to jump to a solution. Respect the danger of the unfamiliar, value the skeptic, and be ready to fight fire with fire.